Hi there, my name's Janelle, and this is the story of the Thanksgiving I'll never forget. My mom booked rooms for everyone, but somehow forgot me. Standing alone in that luxurious lobby, I realized this wasn't just a mistake. It was a message I'd ignored for too long. What happens when you're no longer part of the family frame, but you're still smiling in the picture? Have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? Tell me below. I'm listening. Thanksgiving had always carried a strange weight for me, heavier than it should have. Yet as the taxi pulled up to the resort's grand entrance, I fought to believe this year would be different. Laguna Beach shimmered under a cool golden sun, the scent of salt and blooming magnolias riding the air. I tightened my grip on the handle of my modest suitcase, exhaling as I forced a smile into place. Maybe, just maybe, it would finally feel like family. The marble lobby gleamed like something out of a dream, high ceilings dripping with chandeliers, staff moving gracefully between clusters of laughing guests. I approached the front desk with a hopeful nod, reciting my name politely. For a moment, the receptionist's fingers danced across the keyboard, her expression neutral. Then her brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said, voice tinged with confusion. "There's no reservation under your name." The word struck like a slap. I blinked once, twice, trying to process. Surely it was a mistake, a typo. My heart stumbled into an uneasy sprint as she double-checked the system, her apology growing more uncomfortable. Across the lobby, I caught sight of my mother, Eileen, briskly making her way over, shawl floating behind her like a trailing flag of good intentions. "It's fine," she said, waving dismissively at the flustered receptionist. "The hotel must have mixed something up. She's family." The receptionist hesitated before responding. Her gaze flicked toward the reservation book on the counter. A subtle move, but telling. One glance, 1 second, and the truth was laid bare. Only 2 rooms booked. One for my parents, one for Shauna's family. There was never a mistake. I was never considered. A hollow chill crept under my skin. I smiled tightly, nodding as if everything was fine, as if the bottom hadn't just quietly dropped out beneath my feet. My mother patted my arm too briskly, her touch more about performance than comfort. I knew better than to protest. I gathered my suitcase and moved toward the lounge area, pretending to adjust my scarf, pretending not to notice how my sister's husband was already motioning to the valet for their bags. Everyone carried on effortlessly, their laughter blending into the expensive air. Inside, though, I burned, not with anger, not yet, but with a low, slow humiliation that wrapped around my ribs like wire. I perched on the edge of a cushioned bench, flipping through my phone to call for a taxi. I wasn't leaving, not yet, but knowing I could leave at any moment was a small anchor I clung to. I clutched the handle of my suitcase tighter. It suddenly felt heavier, not just from clothes, but from years of carrying expectations I never asked for. I watched the sun setting through the glass walls, the ocean gilded in fading light. From the corner of my eye, I saw Shauna toss her hair back and laugh, the sound sharp, almost metallic. There was no place for me at their table. No room reserved. Not really. The evening deepened, and I sat there quietly, invisible among the spectacle. No one noticed when I slipped outside. No one asked why my chair at the table stayed empty. On the curb, the cool night air wrapped around me, salt-laden and sharp. I stared at my phone, the screen lighting up my palm in the growing dark. For the first time in years, I wondered if staying silent was a mistake. The dining hall gleamed under crystal chandeliers, the air scented with expensive perfume and roasted turkey. I walked slowly toward the long table set up for our family, willing my breathing to steady. After the awkwardness at the check-in, I should have expected more cracks to show, but some stubborn part of me had hoped for a sliver of normalcy. They had saved me a seat, sort of. A flimsy extra chair wedged at the very end of the table, away from the main cluster, next to a dusty potted plant. No place card with my name, no folded napkin adorned with a ribbon like the others. Just a plain chair, like a placeholder someone forgot to replace. I sat down quietly, folding my hands in my lap. Around me, laughter bubbled up. Eileen leaned over Brielle, adjusting the little girl's silverware with motherly precision. Shauna chatted animatedly with her husband about the holiday specials. Plates arrived, beautifully arranged dishes with handwritten cards indicating special requests. Except mine. My plate was a plain, cold turkey, serving dumped onto china without a second glance. I picked up my fork, the metal heavy in my hand, and tried to carve a bite without feeling like it was carving into me instead. Brielle wrinkled her nose at her vegetables. Within seconds, Shauna waved down a server, Eileen chimed in about allergies, and an entire mini-crisis unfolded to ensure Brielle's plate was perfect. The staff adjusted her meal not once, but twice, smiling warmly as they hovered. No one looked at me. No one asked if my cold turkey or limp green beans were okay. The exclusion was no longer subtle. It was a performance, where I had been cast as invisible. I watched as Brielle giggled when a fresh plate arrived, complete with extra rolls and a side of macaroni she hadn't even requested. The table erupted into fond laughter. I smiled too, because the alternative would have been to cry, and I wasn't ready to unravel. The conversation spun around me, rich and easy. Toasts were made for health, for family, for gratitude. Glasses clinked. Smiles shone under the soft golden light. No one toasted me. No one even acknowledged that I was there. I swallowed a mouthful of water, the ice cubes rattling loudly in my glass, too loud against the polished atmosphere. Maybe they thought I preferred it this way. Maybe they believed that if they pretended I didn't matter, I would quietly agree. I sat through the rest of the dinner feeling like a ghost in a chair. When dessert came, I made my excuses softly, pushing my chair back from the table. It made a screeching noise against the tile, drawing brief glances, but no one spoke. No one stopped me. I slipped away as easily as if I had never been seated there to begin with. The ocean air hit my face the moment I stepped outside, carrying the distant, rhythmic sound of waves against the shore. I walked toward the beach without thinking, my heels sinking slightly into the soft sand. Behind me, laughter floated from the dining hall, muffled by the heavy glass doors. They laughed, they toasted, and not once did they realize who was missing. The morning broke pale and silent, as if even the sun was hesitant to rise over what remained of the weekend. I moved stiffly through the courtyard, where white folding chairs had been set up against a backdrop of rolling waves. A photographer in a crisp polo shirt adjusted his lenses, calling for everyone to gather. There was a strange energy in the air. Forced excitement stretched too thin over the tensions of the night before. Eileen clapped her hands, corralling everyone with bright, brittle cheer. Shauna smiled wide, fixing Brielle's headband just so, tilting her chin for the camera. I stood slightly to the side, not sure where to fit, not sure if there was even space left for me. "We should get a shot of just the immediate family," Shauna said lightly, almost singing it. A casual suggestion, harmless on its surface. Eileen agreed instantly, pulling Martin and Brielle closer. The photographer beamed, adjusting the frame, encouraging them to squeeze tighter for the perfect shot. Without anyone needing to say it aloud, I understood. I stepped back, letting the space close where I had once been standing. The shutter clicked. Smiles froze. Laughter rose around me like a tide I could not wade into. I smiled too, as if it didn't matter, as if it hadn't mattered for years. Later that afternoon, wandering back toward the lobby, I paused outside the main lounge. Through the glass doors, a framed photograph sat on a gleaming console table. The fresh family portrait, already printed and proudly displayed for every guest to admire. They stood together so easily, arms linked, heads tilted affectionately, not even a sliver of space left where I might have fit. I pressed my hand against the cool glass, tracing the frame lightly with my fingertip. It was beautiful, I thought. Perfectly composed. Perfectly empty. The hollowness inside me echoed as I walked away. Conversations blossomed again after the photo session, cheerful and meaningless. I slipped into the group, offering a comment here and there, but my words slid past unnoticed. They didn't ignore me cruelly. They simply moved around me as if I were a misplaced piece in a puzzle long since finished. Someone made another toast. This time to family, to sticking together no matter what. Glasses clinked again. Laughter bounced off the resort walls. I didn't lift my glass. I didn't speak. I stood among them, as invisible as a shadow cast in bright daylight. By evening, I found myself back at the lounge. The framed photo gleamed under the chandeliers, mocking in its perfection. My reflection merged with the smiling faces behind the glass, a ghost haunting a memory she was never part of. Maybe I was never meant to fit in their frame. The boutique gift shop inside the resort smelled of polished wood and sea salt candles. Trinkets lined the shelves, snow globes trapping miniature waves, plush towels embroidered with Laguna Beach logos, silver bracelets arranged delicately under glass. Our family buzzed around the cases with an air of cheerful obligation, the kind that coated everything too thick to feel real. Shauna clapped her hands in delight, Brielle bouncing beside her, pointing to charms shaped like seashells. "We should all get matching bracelets," Shauna said, her voice too loud, too sugary. Everyone agreed immediately. I found myself nodding too, swept along by the current, even as something inside me sank lower. At the counter, Eileen handled the purchases, making sure each bracelet bore a name etched neatly in delicate script: Martin, Eileen, Shauna, Brielle. When mine was handed to me, I turned it over slowly. Smooth, empty, no name, no word of belonging. "Oh," Eileen said casually when she noticed my hesitation. "They must have forgotten to engrave yours." A shrug, a dismissive laugh, and then she moved on, praising Brielle's choice of charm. I said nothing. I slid the blank bracelet onto my wrist, feeling its weight settle like an invisible chain. That evening, as the sunset painted the resort in gold and lavender, Shauna posted a series of photos online. Group selfies, bracelet close-ups, captioned with hashtags about gratitude and family. I paused on one picture, a shot of their wrists stacked together like a promise. My bracelet, blank and alone, had been carefully cropped out. It was deliberate. It had always been deliberate. The cold settled deeper into my chest. Later, in my room, I sat cross-legged on the bed, the bracelet catching the last weak light from the window. I ran my fingers over the smooth, blank surface, remembering every birthday, every graduation, every moment I showed up for them, even when they forgot me. The bracelet wasn't empty because someone forgot. It was empty because there was nothing they had ever intended to give. Quietly, almost ceremonially, I unclasped it and left it on the nightstand. No anger, no scene, only a quiet decision. Maybe belonging was never the gift I was meant to receive from them. I watched the ocean breathing in and out beyond the glass doors. They could keep their bracelets, their photos, their carefully edited memories. I would find something real, something mine. If they could forget me so easily, maybe I should learn to forget them too. The morning sun spilled too brightly across the patio as we settled into an overpriced brunch spot by the water. The kind of place where the coffee came in porcelain cups thinner than paper, and the waiters called you ma'am with rehearsed charm. I sipped my bitter latte, feeling a splinter of something sharp twist deeper inside me. Eileen and Shauna sat across the table, too cheerful, too smooth. Their laughter didn't touch their eyes. I watched their glances flicker, the way their voices lowered whenever I shifted in my chair. They were hiding something. I didn't know what yet, but the knowing sat heavy in my chest, a stone I couldn't swallow. Between bites of croissant and too sweet fruit salad, I heard them mention Walter's name. Thank you, lunch," Shauna said, her voice syrupy. "He's done so much for us. It's only fair we show some appreciation." Something prickled at the back of my neck. They didn't include me in the planning, didn't even ask if I could join. It wasn't just gratitude they were orchestrating. It was something more, something that smelled like betrayal, sharp and sour. Later that day, when most of the family drifted toward the beach, I wandered past the private dining room tucked behind the restaurant. Through a crack in the door, I caught a glimpse. Walter at the head of the table, glass raised in a toast. Eileen to his right, Shauna to his left, smiling too widely. And then I heard it, clear as a slap. "She's too busy with work," Eileen said, laughing lightly. "Janelle's always had her own path." Walter nodded, signing a stack of documents presented by Shauna with a glint of excitement in her eye. They had lied about me, used my absence, manufactured it, to secure more for themselves. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I forced myself to breathe slowly, counting the seconds between inhales. the way I had taught myself during too many sleepless nights. I remembered every holiday, every phone call, every plane ticket purchased without complaint. Every time I'd shown up, even when it hurt. They hadn't loved me for it. They hadn't even noticed. My presence was valuable only when it was silent, only when it could be exploited without resistance. The brunch wasn't just about Walter's money. It was about erasing me from the equation completely, both financially and emotionally. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, the same suitcase I had refused to unpack staring back at me from the corner. I no longer smiled out of obligation. I no longer felt the need to apologize for existing. There was a click inside me, small but final, the kind of sound a door makes when it shuts for good. They could toast each other. They could weave whatever story made them feel better. I was done being the silent audience to their carefully curated lives. As I passed the brunch room again, the laughter spilled out like cheap wine, too loud, too eager. Walter's pen still in Shauna's hand. Eileen's smile sharper than the knives on the table. I paused at the threshold, unseen, unnoticed. Let them toast their lies. I'm done drinking from this poisoned cup. The banquet room had been transformed overnight. Balloons in pastel shades floated above the tables, a banner stitched with Brielle's name hung proudly across the far wall. Waiters moved around swiftly, balancing trays of hors d'oeuvres and flutes of sparkling cider. It was a scene pulled straight from a catalog, perfectly curated, painfully hollow. I found a corner seat near the entrance, more out of instinct than invitation. I watched as Shauna flitted from group to group, clutching Brielle's hand, introducing her like a prize to be displayed. Eileen, regal in a cream blouse, orchestrated the festivities with sharp precision, her smiles timed to the clicks of phones. When it came time for the speeches, the energy shifted slightly. The adults gathered near the cake, and one by one they spoke. About love, about family, about how much Brielle meant to them. Each word carefully crafted, dripping with sentiment. My name was never mentioned. Not once. I sat there, hands folded neatly in my lap, my face a mask of polite attention. Inside, the silence was deafening. It roared in my ears, a relentless reminder that I was an afterthought at best, an unwelcome presence at worst. Then Eileen stepped forward, microphone in hand, smiling warmly at the crowd. "She's growing up so beautifully," she said, voice trembling just the right amount. "And it's because she knows who truly loves her." The words landed with a weight that left me breathless. They didn't need to say my name. The omission was loud enough. I stared at the birthday cake, 3 tiers of perfect frosting, pink roses piped around the edges. A cake I had helped pay for, indirectly, through years of silent sacrifices and unthanked gestures. A cake I wasn't even allowed to touch. Memory flashed unbidden. Birthdays from years past where I had organized games, baked cupcakes, stayed late cleaning up scraps of wrapping paper. They had all blurred into background noise, unnoticed, unimportant. It was never about the gestures. It was always about where you stood in the hierarchy they never admitted existed. As the candles were lit and the singing began, I stayed rooted in my seat, the words catching in my throat. I didn't sing. I didn't smile. I watched Brielle close her eyes and make a wish, and wondered if wishes ever came true for people like me. I knew in that moment that I didn't belong here. Not really. Not anymore. While the family cheered and hugged, I rose quietly. No one noticed. No one cared. I walked past the tables, past the cake, past the sparkling cider and careful smiles. Outside, the afternoon sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. I found a spot by a window and watched them from a distance, their laughter muted by the thick glass. Let them celebrate their illusion. I'm finished pretending. The lounge buzzed with muted conversation, the clinking of glasses and low background music weaving together a false sense of celebration. I lingered near one of the massive windows, staring out into the evening fog swallowing the beach. Behind me, laughter rose and fell like a tide I could no longer hear properly. I turned back toward the group, just in time to see Shauna set her phone down carelessly on a side table, the screen lighting up with a new message. I didn't mean to look. I didn't want to see. But my eyes caught the words anyway. Keep her outside the real family picture. The breath caught painfully in my chest, It was not a slip of the tongue. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a plan. I moved closer, heart pounding against my ribs. Shauna's phone buzzed again. Curiosity and hurt collided inside me, a storm I could no longer contain. Fingers trembling slightly, I opened the thread. Message after message. Weeks' worth. Conversations between Eileen and Shauna, carefully orchestrating my exclusion. Planning seating charts, photo arrangements, narratives to sell to Walter. She can stay for appearances, one read. But keep her out of anything important, another added. Every slight, every cold glance, every casual dismissal, it had been rehearsed, prepped, signed and sealed before I even boarded my flight. The betrayal was systematic, clinical. They hadn't simply drifted from me. They had dismantled me piece by piece until only a shell remained for public display. I scrolled in numb horror, each message a blade slicing deeper. Each smiling photo now felt like a sneer, each laugh a nail driven into the coffin of something I had once dared to call family. The realization unfurled slowly. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty born of hurt feelings. This was policy. This was structure. The archived texts sat on the screen like fossils, proof of a relationship that had died long before I acknowledged it. Somewhere in the background, Brielle laughed, a high, innocent sound, and I felt the final fracture inside me. I closed Shauna's phone and placed it exactly where I found it, the movement precise, detached. Without hesitation, I pulled out my own phone, scrolling down to the group chat labeled Family In. I stared at it for a long moment. Then, with a flick of my thumb, I deleted it. No fanfare, no explanation, just silence. The kind of silence that marked a true ending, not an intermission. Back in my room, I began folding my clothes, packing slowly, methodically. I didn't know exactly when I would leave, but I knew now, with a certainty that pulsed in my veins, that I would not be staying until the final toast. As I zipped my suitcase, a wave of unfamiliar calm washed over me. Not the fragile peace of pretending, but the solid, grounded quiet that comes from facing the truth head-on. I stepped into the hallway, the messages still burning behind my eyes, each word another nail sealing the past behind me. They erased me long before I even thought of walking away. The morning was thick with a damp chill, the kind that clung to your skin and whispered that something was about to break. Clouds hung low over the coastline, casting the resort in a muted gray. I walked into the breakfast room, still wearing the numbness from the night before like an extra layer of clothing. The family sat scattered around a long table, chatting idly, plates half filled with eggs and toast. I slid into a seat at the far end, unnoticed except for the obligatory glances that barely skimmed the surface of acknowledgement. I didn't expect warmth. I didn't expect smiles. I had already made peace with that much. I was stirring my coffee when the words came, slipping from Martin's mouth so casually it didn't even sound like cruelty at first. No one actually invited you here, you know. The clatter of a dropped fork somewhere down the table sounded louder than it should have. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Even the scrape of chairs against the floor seemed to stop. I looked up slowly, the room around me tilting slightly, as if the air itself recoiled from what had been said. For a moment, I thought I might have misheard. Maybe it was a joke, a poor one, but a joke nonetheless. But when I met Martin's eyes, there was no laughter there, just a flat, careless truth. I swallowed against the lump rising in my throat. "Excuse me?" My voice didn't waver, didn't crack. It floated across the table, light but sharp. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. "You're not really family anymore," he said, cutting into his toast like he was discussing the weather. "You chose your career, your independence. You made it clear where your priorities were." No anger, no sorrow, just cold detachment dressed up as logic. Something inside me shifted, an old wound splitting open not with a scream but with a sigh. All the years of showing up, of biting my tongue, of carrying the weight of loyalty they never returned. It unraveled in a slow, silent implosion. The plate in front of me, untouched, seemed to mock me. I couldn't even pretend to digest this anymore. Without a word, I placed my napkin neatly beside my plate. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I simply stood up as quietly as I had arrived. Eileen's eyes flickered toward me, something like uncertainty flashing across her face. Shauna's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Walter said nothing, his gaze rooted to the table. I didn't offer a farewell. No dramatic speech, no accusations. Just a soft parting of air as I moved past them. Outside, the morning mist wrapped around me, cool and clean. I pulled my suitcase behind me, the wheels whispering over the stone path. They had uninvited me from their lives long before today. Now, I finally RSVP no. The lobby was still half asleep when I dragged my suitcase across the polished floor, the sound of the wheels whispering after me. The mist outside had thickened, folding the coastline into itself like a secret. My boots squeaked slightly as I pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped out into the gray morning. There was no one to see me leave. No final pleas, no sudden changes of heart. Just me and the growing distance between who I had been and who I was becoming. I didn't announce my departure. I didn't leave a note. Some things are better left unsaid. The cool air nipped at my cheeks as I walked to the waiting taxi. The driver offered a polite nod, loading my bag into the trunk without questions. As we pulled away, the resort shrank behind us, swallowed by fog and memory. On the road to the airport, I leaned my head against the window, watching the trees blur into soft green smudges. I thought about all the times I had fought for a seat at their table, for a sliver of their love, for the illusion of belonging. And I thought about how none of it had ever really been mine. I realized now. Loving myself mattered more than forcing anyone else to love me. At the airport, surrounded by strangers hustling to their gates, I felt oddly light, like shedding an old skin, like breathing a cleaner kind of air. On the plane, I flipped open a blank page in my journal and began to scribble plans. Therapy, travel, maybe volunteering somewhere during the next Thanksgiving, somewhere far from the staged smiles and brittle toasts. New traditions, new definitions of family, built on choice instead of obligation. My phone buzzed persistently, vibrating against the tray table. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Eileen, Shauna, maybe even Martin. Messages begging, bargaining, blaming. I let the screen go dark without touching it. Some conversations didn't deserve to be reopened. Some bridges burned cleaner if you just walked away without turning around. As the plane took off, the coastline fell away beneath the clouds. I watched until there was nothing left to see but endless blue. They had broken the ties long before today. I had simply found the courage to stop trying to weave them back together. Some ties are meant to be broken, so something better can grow. Walking away from the people you once called family is never easy. But sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let go of what hurts you, even when it carries your own blood. I realized that love, real love, is never conditional. It doesn't require you to shrink yourself or silently bear wounds for the sake of appearances. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to walk toward peace, even if you have to walk alone for a while. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to put yourself first, no matter how much it hurt? I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments, whether it's a number 1 if you felt this message hit home, or let me know where you're watching from. And if this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to the channel. More stories of strength, healing, and finding your true path are waiting for you. Let's keep growing together.